big silence. The big silence.
Hello. Welcome back to the Big Silence podcast. It's your host, Karena Dawn. Shout out to all of you who listen and share these podcasts with many, many friends and loved ones and making us the #1 mental health and self-development pod. I am sitting here back in Texas, in Austin. Big exciting week at my house this week. I am hosting a friend's wedding, which I'm really excited about. It's Lindsay Morgan. If you haven't listened to her podcast on The Big Silence, definitely go listen to that. She's just such a beautiful, beautiful human. Been through a lot and has really dove deep into her mental health journey. And also this month, I'm Tone It Up. I'm a co-founder of Tone It Up, if you don't already know that. We are launching our Power Up Challenge, which launches October 2nd. So make sure you go to toneitup.com/powerup to sign up for the challenge. I really love this one. So when I was creating it, I wanted to just feel really strong. Women are so powerful and strong, and we take our fitness that we do on the mat and we take it out into the world. So this whole Power Up journey is to become even stronger together and feel good. You know, I work out for my mental health. We all are on a different fitness journey. Our bodies change all the time, as you know, mine has. I'm proud. I'm 42 and feeling great. I know I've received some comments on, you know, Karena, you don't look like you did in 2017. And I'm like, no, I don't. But I look great and I feel great in my fitness journey now. And I work out, I move my body every day in some way, whether it's a walk in nature, a Tone It Up app workout, going to the gym and working out with my girlfriends. So point of that is Power Up with me. October 2nd, we are launching it. It's 4 weeks, 25 workouts in 30 days. See you there. toneitup.com/powerup. Also this month is Suicide Prevention Month, and we are doing a fundraiser at The Big Silence. So link is in the show notes. This is one of my favorite programs that we do is Therapy for All, where we sponsor therapy. A lot of times health insurance doesn't cover therapy, or therapists don't accept health insurance. And therapy is something that has helped me through so much in my life. And I want to make sure, you know, with The Big Silence, the conversations we don't want to have, we need to end the stigma around therapy. I remember actually when I was in my early 20s and I first wanted to get into therapy, and I was dating someone, and he was like, well, therapy is for crazy people. And I was like, no, therapy is for people who want to do the work. That was where the stigma was back then. So help support us, help other people. Even $5 towards the program, it helps so many. So link is on in the show notes as well. And today's guest is Snake. He's best known for the guitarist of one of the longest and largest heavy metal bands, Skid Row. He co-founded the band in 1986, and he co-writes many of the songs, including their biggest hit, which is 18 Alive. And currently, he is out on tour. So my friend Eric Baker, he introduced me to Snake, one of the nicest guys. His mental health journey and his music and what he's putting out there and his journey. Like, I'm just excited to share this conversation. Snake, shout out to you. You are awesome and have a great tour. Snake is here. #1, where did Snake come from?
Man, it was given to me when I was like 12 years old. We used to sit there and go up. There's a ton of kids in my neighborhood that we were all kind of the same age, maybe a couple years older. And we used to go play basketball during the summertime. It was like shirts versus skins. So one day I was a skin, and someone noticed that I had this one chest hair coming out of my chest that was really long. And that one person happened to be Mr. Jon Bon Jovi. And he goes, we grew up together. So he goes, ew, that looks like that's gross. Get rid of that. I'm like, no, man, I'm becoming a man. It's my first chest hair. He goes, gross. It looks like a snake. I'm like, whatever, dude. And he
And it stuck.
started calling me Snake since that point on, and it stuck. And then as we got older, and he always just kept calling me Snake, and obviously other people started calling me the same thing. And I realized as I was getting in bands and starting to play out and stuff like that, it was a name that was very memorable. That people would go, okay. Like, I remember that name. I don't remember, Steve's name, but I remember Snake. And so I kept it.
I mean, I like it. I think
Thank you.
if I had an animal name, it would be Bear.
Mm.
My dad named me that when I was a little kid. I was Bear. Just because we would like go camping and I would be outside tents and be like, "Rawr." But anyway,
Oh,
I
that's funny.
yeah.
See,
So
now what's interesting with me is like I don't hate snakes, but I'm not a fan of them. It's not like I have it's not like I have 16 of them underneath a stairwell in my like slash or something like that, And I'm not a big snake guy. I never owned one, didn't want to own one, but somehow I'm beholden to the name.
well, I love it. And all right, so you are about to embark on a tour,
Yes.
and you've been a rock star since the 80s.
I've been a guitar player since the 80s. I don't know about a rock star,
You're a
but
rock star. I was actually just listening to some of your music before I came up to the studio with Bobby, my husband. He's like, "You know this song?" My husband was like rocking out to your music. But
Oh, that's cool.
let's talk about Little Snake before we get
Okay.
into. I'm going to call you a rock star because I think you are.
You're the one.
No. So, where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? And what led you to music?
My childhood, I grew up in a little town called Sayreville, New Jersey, um, which is about 30 minutes north of Asbury Park, 20 minutes southeast of Rutgers University, and about 50 minutes south of New York City, if you take the train. And I grew up I was born in the 60s, and so that's the tail end of the baby boomers, and so there was a lot of people in our neighborhood that were around the same age as me, and or a little bit older. But I had four older brothers, and my dad wasn't around. My dad kind of left when I was two. He'd show up every Christmas, maybe sometimes once in the summer. My mother and him never got a divorce. My mom believed in the sanctity of marriage, as Roman Catholics from that era did. So she was really sticking to the for better or for worse. And unfortunately, it was for her. I believe it was for worse, but for me, um, I was as I later on in life, I realized how lucky I was to be raised by my mom and my brothers, and it taught me a lot of things that maybe my hardened old man wouldn't have been able to teach me. So I was really thankful for that. It's one of those things where um, I guess I didn't realize it was a good thing until I became an adult. When I started understanding the that it wasn't normal, like that everybody else's families were intact, at least in our neighborhood, uh, that I and mine wasn't. And so I was given all these reasons by my brothers why he wasn't there, and they were all trying to just protect me.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter was that he didn't want to be my mom's husband anymore. He didn't want to be our dad anymore.
So when you were a kid, you had a diagnosis as a child. Right.
Yeah, as a child, yes, I did.
And that's again, I want to point out this is in 60s, 70s,
70s.
before, 70s when you had a diagnosis. And I always talk about how I grew up in the 90s and had no clue about this. So walk me through what that was like and how you were diagnosed manic depressive, bipolar, one or two, like even as a kid, right?
Yeah, like my house was always full of music, and this is going back to your previous question. So I had a most amazing experience, learning experience, education, if you will, music education through the music that my mom and my brothers played. And it was everything that ranged from Elvis and even like the Andrew sisters and Sinatra, to Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard, and then the Beatles and all the Leslie Gore and the 60s pop hits, and Motown was huge, and the Beach Boys, and then going into the 70s where, the post Woodstock era. And I had all of this every day. It was amazing because there was no genres. There was no this is metal and that's crap. It wasn't anything like that.
Mhm.
It's like, this is music. Either you loved it, you could love the Eagles as much as you loved Black Sabbath. There
Mhm.
was no judgments. I love that. Uh, but what started happening is that, I started realizing that, my dad wasn't around. That kind of had me questioning things. And then when I was about 7, my brother who was raising me got drafted to Vietnam. And that was really, really
Wow. Yeah.
difficult. That because I was watching the guy that I was most attached to, that was my hero that I looked up to. He was being taken away. And the only thing I knew is that he was going to a place where a lot of people were being killed. And I do remember seeing like Walter Cronkite on the news and TV showing body bags of dead soldiers. I remember that vividly. And I was like, oh my God, that's where my brother's going. So I started wrestling with this abandonment stuff without knowing that's what it was. And looking back on it and having done, therapy and research and stuff, I didn't ask any questions like, why isn't dad around? Because the answer I got, I guess inherently I knew wasn't the truth.
Yeah.
So my dad leaves. Maybe it's because of me, because he raised all my other brothers. My brother Rick leaves to go to Vietnam. Well, maybe it's because of me, because he didn't leave any of the other brothers. So I start formulating this reasoning in my brain. And the more things happen, little things, I start relating it to me being the cause of it. My mother has to go to work and clean houses. She's not home when I get home from school. It's my fault. Like, I must be the reason that she's not here. And no one is telling me differently. So at a very early age, I'm building this repetitive behavior in my head.
I'm the
And
one. It's all my fault.
it's becoming like the ABCs. Keep repeating it, it becomes truth. And it becomes second nature. So as I'm going through my life, every time something happened that was in and of itself was nothing, I would place the blame on myself. It's my fault. So I started having this very low opinion of me that I couldn't escape. So and I wouldn't ask questions because, like, from an emotional standpoint back then, you didn't ask questions about emotional well-being. You didn't sit there. I mean, when you're an infant or a toddler, I'm sad because I don't have candy. It's like, but
Yeah.
as you're growing older, it's not about, you got nothing to be sad about. Get over it.
Yeah.
That's the mentality.
That's the mentality. We're going to work through that because I've heard the get over it thing many times, and we are changing that narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, that was that was the first in a long line of bad reasoning and for myself. So it was instilled in me that you're supposed to get over it. Okay, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, so I will. And I failed over and over and over. And as the more I failed, the more my self-esteem decreased. The more I looked at myself as not worth what I was maybe a week before, a month before. Not that I was gauging it, but I could feel my outlook on myself diminishing to the point where I must not be lovable. Like I'm coming up with these answers in my head. I'm
And how
forming.
yeah, and you're a young kid, and, like, how do you even know? And I think it's so important too, and as you tell us, walk us through this period of your life, and maybe even sharing, like, what do we need to teach our youth to feel loved?
To me, the most important thing is to talk, to communicate.
Mm,
That's the biggest thing, and that didn't happen for
mhm,
me for a while. And then by the time I was able to communicate any of this, I was acting out, and then someone noticed there's an issue.
mhm,
Um, I started. I remember cutting myself for the first time on my arm in
mm,
my mom's garage. Um, and kinda understanding why I was doing it.
mhm.
It was an impulse, but it was also, like, I come to find out later, it was more defined as me being felt I needed to be punished for who I am.
Mm.
Like, I needed to feel
Yeah.
like I was being punished because of the person I was needed to be punished.
That's so interesting. So I talk about this in my memoir, and I also cut as a teenager, and I think for me, it was almost just feeling alive and present and seen, like, I and control. And so I think for different people, like, why are you doing this? From eating disorders to cutting to this and that and acting out. It's just that it is a cry for help and to be seen.
Without a doubt, and what's interesting is when I did it, I was more like saying to myself, "You're an asshole," and cut myself,
Anger, yeah.
and then hiding it
Mhm.
because you're gonna get in trouble. So
Uh,
it's a
yeah,
really, confusing, uh, catch-22
yeah,
that
yeah.
that I find myself caught in, and I didn't it wasn't that I cut every day. I didn't do that, but I would cut myself or I would do something else to inflict some sort of pain or punishment on myself. When
It
the feeling built up of not being, worthy
Mhm.
or not being loved, or lovable, uh, that would result in me doing something like either cutting myself or doing something reckless and getting in like a bike accident or something like that, like trying to jump a swamp or something,
Mhm.
like something that I knew would probably not turn out well.
Isn't it so interesting? Because 'Cause we're from different generations and generations behind us and ahead of us, and, how, like, this and you don't have to have an answer for this at all. I'm just, thinking in my head how cutting has been around for decades, and how is that in our generational trauma that we no one tells us what this is, but
Yeah.
it's something that's there, like, in the human mind. And again, you don't have to have an answer for it. I'm just like,
No,
wow,
no,
this has
I
been
I can relate to that
yeah.
though. That was the conundrum was there were no answers.
Mhm.
Like I was too young to understand the complexity of what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
I didn't have the brain cells yet.
Yeah. Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and all I knew was everything was coming across as black and white, and I was left to form my own decisions
Mhm.
and reasonings. And so, part of the problem again is that generation taught us that you could talk about a sprained ankle and you could
Mhm.
talk about a broken finger. But you can't talk about something that's going on with your brain.
Mhm. 'Cause
It
it's just
doesn't, because that makes you crazy. And we don't have crazy people in this house because it's an embarrassment. And if it's an embarrassment, I'm not going to be embarrassed by your craziness. So it's all kept silent. So having that being underlying sort of family dynamic, I never said a word
yeah.
to anybody for with the exception, and I didn't even really say anything to the child psychologist that I met with. I only ever really started saying something was I was in my mid-30s, maybe?
Well, okay. That's the same as me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean,
And
yeah, I would say
me
early.
having this there's such a weird thing that goes on too. You feel worthless, but you feel like you have this superhero ability to
Mhm.
overcome it.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't be at more opposite ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and that's kind of I guess I felt that I could overcome it or live with it because there wasn't any other options for me
Mhm.
that I knew of. Like, all I knew of was electroshock therapy. That was a reality when I was a kid.
But even with you as a child growing up and you go back and we've talked a little bit about your diagnosis, but um going back and we talked about this before about my dad. Uh, my grandma was pregnant with him when they were immigrating and going through just the trauma of getting over from the Ukraine and then Germany and over to the US. But your mom also attempted suicide while she was pregnant with you. And
Yeah,
think about the trauma that you already had before birth. And that's the thing. Like
yeah.
that,
It's a
you know,
very real thing for
yeah.
sure. And the causes and the effects of that, you don't I didn't, I shouldn't say you or anybody else. I didn't come to realize until I was in my 40s. Like, when my mom finally excuse me. No, I was in my 30s, excuse me, my late 30s. When my mom finally came clean and told me about this,
Mhm.
and I was like, "You've got to be kidding me, like, that's
Mhm.
really unreal." And then to tell me that, yeah, and she saw her father at
Mhm.
age 5, age 6, commit suicide right in front of her.
Mhm. Mm.
It's like,
It's
man, that effect of that is gonna have a ripple effect that's gonna go on for a long time.
generational trauma. So you see where it is. You already experienced trauma before you were even on the other side of mama's womb.
Yeah,
And so now, like, when you study and understand this, you're like, oh, okay. Because it is a lot of traumas that can trigger mental illness, mental health issues, depression, this. And I think that's so important to educate our children now of what they may be feeling, how generational trauma is in ourselves, and then how do we work through it. And then realizing like it's okay. This is this is life. A diagnosis is not an end all. It's a superpower.
yeah.
And yeah, but yeah.
The thing for me that I had to learn, I should say I had to learn it, but it by learning it made all the difference in the world, was getting over the stigma of silence,
Mhm. Mhm.
hence, your
Mm.
podcast.
Makes sense. Yeah.
That was, that was huge, um, because I was basically a liar
Mhm.
for, more than half my life,
Mhm.
and, so creating I created another character, if you will, to like, I wasn't the guy that got molested when he was 12 years old. That happened to somebody else. I'm the guy who saw it, and I feel terrible for that guy that it happened to, but it wasn't me. And that made it livable.
Yeah.
It made it so I could go on.
Have you
Because
talked in therapy about that?
I have in the past, yes.
Yeah.
I have in the past.
That's
It was
significant. And
very much so. And
Yeah.
I knew, look, I knew that that was huge. Like that was, but excuse me, the fear of exposing myself to that act was far more overwhelming to me than anything else. So I chose to create, like I said, a different character. This guy is always smiling. This guy is always telling jokes. This guy that loves sports, that loves music, that'll do anything for everybody, put himself second to everybody else. And there was a lot of there is a lot of good in a lot of that I've kept, that I guess was already embedded inside of me. But there was no one knew what was going on. There was an instance in high school where I started acting out. I was really, really lucky that I did well in school, and I had to work at it, but I didn't have to work extremely hard at it. And so after I discovered that I wanted to do music, which I was around 14 and a half years old, I quit all sports, because that was one of the things that ingratiated me to my family, was that I was pretty good in sports, and everyone thought that I had this career mapped out. So when I came home after seeing Kiss at Madison Square Garden and saying, "Well, I ain't going to college and I ain't playing sports," and at that time I'm 13, they're like, what?" And no one believed me. Like, "How? You're 13 years old. How can you know what you're going to do?" I'm like, "Man, I know what I'm going to do. It's going to be music. I don't know what, but it's going to be music." So cut to a year later, I realized that it's the guitar. And I'm like, I find this guitar. John, who lived up the street from me, had already been playing. So that was inspiring. And he taught me some stuff. And
when you
it
say
just,
John, are you talking about Jon
Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi? Okay, just
Yeah.
casual. You're like, John. It's John.
Well, he's one of my best buds. And
Yeah.
I'm like the only one that doesn't treat him, besides his family, like the rest of the world. But he had been, he lived 3 streets away from me, and we had known each other for a few years at that point, and we're buddies. And so he started showing me some chords, and it came really, really easily to me. And so he turned me on to his teacher, who lived across the street. And I just knew, like, this was it. I was giving up sports. I was dedicating myself to this, and I was going to isolate myself. And I did. I isolated myself in my bedroom, and that's when people started wondering if anything's wrong. I'm like, no, I love this guitar so much. It's a thing that I can use to express myself that I don't know how to do verbally. I could do it through this
Absolutely.
amazing instrument.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that when I'd be lying in my room and I'd be really, really depressed, and I guess there were suicidal thoughts at that point, not to the degree of any sort of acting upon them, but definitely dark thoughts. Everything I would write would be like this forlorn sort of subject matter.
Yeah.
The lack of being lovable, the lack of being worthy. All these little stupid things I wrote that was the theme. But I loved that I could express myself through this instrument. And so as I isolated myself, my social identity was no longer existent. I was no longer the guy that would hang out and crack jokes throw keg parties in the woods and things like that. And I was kind of disappearing. And that's when I start acting out a little bit. I can remember being a junior in high school and being in English class. And when I stopped playing sports, I got ostracized from all the jocks.
Mm-hmm.
And the dirtbags wanted nothing to do with me because I was a jock. So I was kind of left in this limbo, this zone of
just a loner now.
yeah,
Where do
yeah,
you belong? Who are you? What
yeah,
are
yeah.
And
Now I still had, like my older friends like John and those guys, but like my close circle of friends were kind of gone. And so wrestling with these feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. And I'm in English class, and the English teacher was a really cool teacher. She was very supportive of me of my writing. She liked the way that I wrote. But we had this thing where I guess we were debating a book, and then two sides of the class split up, and one side was facing the other side. And so it was this big book, and we're going back and forth, and I'm not engaged at all. And I have this big book, and there was a guy that was a friend of mine who I played sports with. My family knew as well. My mom knew his mother and father, and we were friends. And until we weren't, and he said something really sarcastic to me because I was aloof, I guess. I don't know. I just
yeah.
wasn't a part of that thing. And without anything, I stood up and grabbed my book, this big ass book, and whipped it right out of his head, walked out of the door, walked out of school, and started walking home. And my teacher called up Dr. Burkham, who was a child psychologist. And I had met with him a couple times at the behest, and now I'm starting to get the timeline straight, at the behest of a guidance counselor who was really good friends with my family.
Yep.
And so I met with him a couple times, and he pulls over, and I'll never forget, he was driving a brown 280Z, and pulled up to, there's a long sidewalk along the road, and he's like, you need a ride? I go, I'm not going back to school. He goes, no, I'll give you a ride home. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And in the car we talked, and he said, what's going on? And I gave him as much information as I possibly could. I didn't divulge a whole hell of a lot, nothing about cutting or the dark thoughts that I had or anything like that. But when next time we got back I had went to his office at the school, which was maybe a week or a few days after, I can't remember. We sat down, and he goes, judging from what some of your teachers are telling me and the way that you are, I think you have some sort of depression. And me, I'm going, duh, yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I'm a pretty sad.
So even back then what they say, oh, you have some sort of depression. Do they dive in and say what's going on at home, what's going on in your life?
Yep, a little bit. I mean, I certainly didn't come clean about being molested. That wouldn't, no one would know about that for a long, long time. And I only touched a little bit on, I didn't, at that point, I was going through so many changes with how I felt regarding my dad's situation. And, by that point, my brother had gotten home from Vietnam, but he was a different person. And so our relationship was completely different. Again, my fault. So there wasn't a lot of in-depth stuff. And again, like I said, the only treatment I knew for crazy people was, electroshock therapy is what I saw on TV. And I knew about lobotomies and things like that. They scared the daylights out of me. So my whole fear was, my logic is, well, I'm not going to give them enough information for them to prescribe me that. I don't want to go down that road, so I'm going to protect myself in any way that I can. But he was a good guy. He was a guy that first said to me, if I'm not mistaken, why don't you do some research? You seem to be, a guy that, is looking for answers.
Yeah.
So I did a term paper called The Causes and Effects of Depression. And it came out good, and I learned some stuff. But the problem was, and I didn't realize this until later, is that there wasn't a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yeah.
really wasn't a lot of information. And that fact would later on make me go, would make me furious.
Yeah.
It would, as I got older into my 20s and stuff like that, and beyond, even more as I got more of a, I took an actual real interest in my own psyche.
Yeah.
Again, I had done so much to cover it up for so long, and then all of a sudden, or cut to the band forming and the band becoming successful. My whole thing is like, oh my God, I can't say anything now. I could, maybe would ruin our success.
Okay. Number one, I wrote a term paper about and research I had to do, and this is 20 years after you probably did your term paper, and I did a paper on having a mother with depression, and I just researching myself, and this is where we need to stop and not have the kids do the work and really have the resources out there where I'm in the library looking up about schizophrenia and I hear the word depression, looking at and then doing a paper, which I still have today.
I have mine somewhere too.
I got
My
an
mother
A
saved it.
minus,
My
but
mother,
that was good.
yeah, yeah. I got some. It was some great grade that I got for it, and like I said, my teacher, I think her name was Mrs. Tiskevich. She's a fellow Polak.
Yeah.
She was really cool. She was cool, and she actually, without me really knowing it, but knowing it, she was very helpful.
Well, I read back because when I did all my research of my old journals when I was writing my memoir, and I'm like, how could a teacher not see what I just wrote and just be like, A minus, great vocabulary. This, I'm like,
Exactly.
I'm fucked up. Like, that's it.
Yep. No, that's true. That's really funny. You should say that too. They treat it more from a grammatical
Yeah.
standpoint than an actual life or death situation.
They're like, you misspelled this word. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't
You
care.
misspelled help.
Yeah. Okay, but then I was saying, so you started this band, which I want to go into this because it's, a great story. But you were saying how, oh, you can't let anyone know. And when I started Tone It Up and a fitness and a wellness person, I was like, I cannot let anyone know about my past, from my mother, her diagnosis, from my drug misuse, any of this. It has to stay hidden. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago where I started talking about it. And then you realize how many people come out of the woodworks and say, thank you for sharing. This is what I've gone through too. And normalizing that conversation. So, number one, you start a rock 80s rock band called Skid Row.
Yes.
So why did you feel like you had to hide?
Oh, because I felt that if I had exposed my true self, no one's going to want to play in a band with me.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to want to be associated with, a lunatic, a crazy person, whatever that we were referred to in general back in that day. Again, the stigmas that were presented and built in the 60s and long before that, but just for me being born in 64 and starting to see that 69, 70 and how it worked. And again, that coupled with the fact of coming to my own conclusions on my own about why certain events were occurring in my life, and they were all my fault. Then when the molestation happened, that was the one that said, must have been my fault because it happened to me. All of this makes sense now. Your dad left you because you're unlovable. Your brother left you because you're unlovable. These kids attacked you and molested you because you're unlovable. So you're unlovable. So what do? You sequester yourself. You thankfully find something that offers you a way to express yourself where you're not being exposed, where you're not telling, hey, this is what happened to me. Like, I'm not writing literal words. Everything is metaphors. And so I'm not getting exposed for what's really going on. I'm just influenced by maybe some of the darker aspects of life. So keeping the secret was hugely important because I was so fearful that it would not allow me to become successful.
Well, I'm sure you feel lovable now with your beautiful wife, Tina.
I do. I'm really, really fortunate. And you know, and a big thing to go to right along with that is that um, we have 2 kids, twins, boy and a girl. They're 17 years old, and they're just starting college. And so they're my stepchildren. I met them when they just turned 6 years old. So we've been together for quite a while, and we have an amazing, amazing relationship with one another. And I love them because I consider them my own, and I will do everything that I can for them without fail. And one of the things is being honest. And so going back about 5 years, 4 or 5 years ago, I'm off medication. I've been off for 2 or 3 years. Life is amazing. I've lost a bunch of weight, got in great shape. Everything is good. I'm getting my creativity back.
Which we've talked about, and a lot of time people do go off medication because it can, like, if you're a creative person, like my mom was an artist, you're a musician, you're an artist. And when you're on that medication, it just, it's finding that right cocktail of how you can be a great husband, be a great father, be a great musician, and that balance between it all. So you went off
It's
in 2019.
I was off for a little while. In
Yeah.
2019, I, out of nowhere, had a massive breakdown.
Mhm.
Out of nowhere. I was in an airport in, I think, Phoenix or somewhere, Vegas. I mean, I think it was Phoenix. I'm not sure. We were flying somewhere, and I felt it when I woke up in the morning, and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't felt this in a long time. But I've got the tools now. I can beat this. And once again, it's your body is stronger than you think. And everything was going haywire. My neurotransmitters were going berserk. I'm sure my serotonin was really low. My dopamine's off the charts and all this stuff. And I'm not on meds, so there's nothing to regulate it. And I find myself in a fetal position underneath a ticketing agent's desk at a what's it called? Gate at the airport that's not being used. So I'm there underneath this desk by myself in a fetal position, sobbing my eyes out, calling my wife, going, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. She's like, where's the band? I go, I don't know. She's like, describe to me where you're at. She was able to calm me down, but I'm sobbing. One of my band members finds me. And I'm like, I'm so embarrassed because I've been doing so well. I was creative again. I looked like me. Um, and then boom,
Do you
out
think
of nowhere.
something like, can you look at what maybe triggers you? Were you going on tour? Were you
We were on tour.
on tour? Okay.
We were on tour already, and there's stresses obviously that go
Yeah.
along with that, but I've always been able to handle them in the past, the stresses of touring. So I'm not quite sure. It might have been a culmination of a bunch of things that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Or maybe I didn't pay attention to, or maybe my ego said, no big deal,
Yeah.
which very well could be because, I'm
Yeah.
sitting there going, I'm 3 years off the meds and I've got this thing beat.
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't beat it. You manage it, but you don't beat it.
So have you created any tools when you feel that I'm just gonna give it a name of anxiety? It's something else going on. Like it's kind of like things that you can do to help manage. And are you back on the meds then now?
Yes, I am. I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
One of the things, going back real quick to that incident, one of the things that happened was the band we were supposed to go to Europe, and the band got me on that flight, and then I was able to find a friend of ours to take my place because I knew I was going to make it to Europe. There's just no way.
Yeah.
And so I got home. My wife picked me up and went straight to the emergency room where the psych hospital is, and they started helping me and to get level, if you will.
Mhm.
And that took days. That
Yeah.
took I was bedridden at the house for quite a few days, not being able to really speak or anything like that. Very despondent
Yeah.
because now the guilt that this
Mhm.
happened again, and I thought it
Yeah.
was, and the fact that my band had to suffer because of it. And then I think the biggest thing was that my wife and my kids had to see this.
Mhm.
So that's when I started feeling better, my wife had a discussion with the kids, and at the time, they were around 12, and when I was able to, I was still in bed, this is probably about 5 days later, we all sat down on the bed, and we had a conversation, and, they were amazing. Like, I started explaining what it is that, I have, what goes on within me, and it's been there since I was young. And one of the things I found it adorable that they asked me, they go, "Well, can we catch it? Is it contagious?"
Yeah.
And I just started, they put the first smile on my face, and I was like, "You know what? Thankfully, no, you can't. You can't. But we just want to, we're family, so we need to be honest with one another that this is what I go through,
Yeah.
and this is what I'm doing to help it not be something that has such a negative impact on our family." And so that conversation in and of itself was part of the healing.
I think it's so important for that. These conversations being like, "It's okay. We got you. We're family. We're a support system." And I've even had, you know, I've been on tour for fitness and 15 cities in 30 days, and I learned how to set those boundaries, and then I have guilt because I can't do something or show up after a tour stop but I finally it's important for everyone to hear, like, if you and I'll give an example. I was filming workouts for days, and then I was supposed to finish filming content and go to the airport here in Austin immediately and fly to an event that my friend Jewel, she's a musician as well, was doing. She works in mental health. I'm sure you know who Jewel is. She's just beautiful soul.
Right.
And I had this panic attack and I wasn't well. I overworked myself. I didn't, whatever came over me. I also had an allergic reaction to something and I felt so guilty. I canceled on Jewel. And, but
Wow.
her response was, "Girl, take care of you. I completely understand it. I've had to do it too. I was filming a TV show and I had to stop production for a week because of anxiety or whatever." So we really just need to be there to support each other. It's okay. Okay. Like it's more not like, I can't believe you're canceling on me or this. It's how, you know, take your time. How can I support? Um, and, yeah.
I can't imagine what would have happened many occasions
Yeah.
had my wife not been there,
Mhm.
for me had my band members, my best friends not been there understanding. I can remember the like I when everybody found out, like I told one person about the being molested
Mhm.
in like 1997. Um One person, and I swore them to secrecy and didn't speak about it from that point forward until around 1999. Like I lived in this house in Jersey. Uh, some of my band members lived there with me. Uh, Luckily, it was a big house, so we didn't get in each other's way. But my door was always open, so my friends were always could come over any time of day or night they wanted, and it's just the way it was. So one night, and I had been having these unreal anxiety and panic attacks that were otherworldly. I had never ever had anything like this in my life,
Mhm.
and I guess this is around 99. Um, and they had been going on for a while, and I was always able to hide it from everybody. But I would be I called it I could feel them coming on, I called it the black wave, and I
Mhm.
knew when it was gonna happen, and I knew what was gonna happen, and I knew I'd be yelling like this, guttural cry, if you will, out of my soul, and the only way I could describe it was it every time it happened, it felt like someone was ripping my soul out of my chest. It was a very physical, obviously emotional, but a very physical feeling. Like I was like, this is unbearable. Praying that, like, God, just let me stop breathing. Like things like that, like unheard of requests. And so one night, I would go through 3 or 4 a day, and I would always
Oh,
be
wow.
able to when it was
So
coming on, I'd
yeah.
always be able to make an excuse of, "Oh, I gotta run down 7-Eleven." And
Mhm.
I get my car, I go to 7-Eleven, I park in the back thing and go berserk,
Mhm.
sobbing, banging my head against the steering wheel, things like that. Excuse me. So one night, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I realize I'm having one, about to have one,
Mm.
and I go in my closet in my bedroom, in the corner, on the floor, in a fetal position, with a holding onto a pillow with a blanket over me, and I'm losing it, and I'm sobbing, and I'm wailing. And one of my friends decided to come over after the bar closed and was looking for me, and he could hear like this whimpers, I guess, and found me. And he's like, "What is going on?"
So
And
then
I'm
what did he do? 'Cause
took
I
me to
I
the
think it's
hospital.
hospital, okay.
Took me to the hospital. Um, and then I had a horrific experience at the hospital where they put me in a padded room
Mm.
with restraints, and it looked like one flew over the
Mm.
cuckoo's nest. And
Mhm.
there was one window in there with the
Mhm.
wire, one
Mhm.
square window. And I'm like, this just went from bad to worse.
Can we just tell hospitals with dealing with mental patients, instead of putting you in a dark room with no windows, maybe nature? Tie me to a tree. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't have the solution, but I just think of that visual, and, like, maybe what you needed at that time was to be sitting at the ocean with a a a therapist next to you or something, but putting you in a room like that, and
And
again, not an expert here, but if I if that happens to me, take me outside.
no, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" They're like, "We wanna keep you here for 72 hours." I'm like, "I'm not staying 72 seconds. Like,
Yeah,
you want me to stay here for 72 hours? You just made this worse.
yeah,
Like,
and
you're gonna strap me down on this table? Like, really? Like, that I'm supposed to feel better about where I am now? I'm, like, ready to just off myself in front of you." So, That's
Mm-hmm.
when it started coming out, though. That's like
Yeah.
when people started going, uh-oh. And my weight loss was very, very dramatic. I was seeing excuse me, I was seeing a psychiatrist down in Philadelphia as well as a therapist. They were both great. And then I was kind of going back and forth with this whole thing, going to different the psychiatrist down in Philly prescribed me some stuff, but it didn't work. I went to a psychiatrist in Jersey, a couple. They prescribed me some stuff and went Depakote and Paxil and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that would work for a short period of time, then stop, and it felt worse. But none of these people, with the exception of the woman in Philly, would have any conversations with me. It would be a 10-minute
Oh yeah.
quick interview. All right, here you go.
Oh yeah.
Here's
That's what.
Effexor and lithium
Yeah.
and
That's
so
what your health insurance covers is 10 minutes with the doctor and then a prescription.
well, what happened is, so after that incident, I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I had a bottle of Klonopin,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I'm in the house by myself. Everybody else is off doing whatever. I'm going, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Chug that bottle of Klonopin, take a big swig of I think I was drinking like vodka and Dr. Pepper or Jack and Dr. Pepper, something like that. Take a big swig of it, and I realize immediately, I go, dude, you just crossed that threshold, man. Like you just crossed that friggin' threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately like made myself throw up and vomited and now I'm panicking.
Mm-hmm.
Now like there's stuff everywhere. Look, it was instantaneous. It was like down, crazy, up. So then I'm like, I call up one of my best buddies, Mike, and so he's aware now what's been going on, as are my band members and stuff like that. But still no one knows about the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Still haven't, and one person does. And so I call up Mike, and Mike goes, I got to call your doctor, and calls the doctor down in Philly. And she goes, she used to work at a place called Friends Hospital down in Philadelphia that was had a unit for psych patients, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so he brought me down there, and they checked me in, and I spent weeks down there, and I couldn't believe what I saw there. I was like, this is just making it worse. It's just making it worse. How the insurance companies were basically predicated how long a person could stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was unbelievable to me. And so, of course, in an effort to take the onus off of me and my own care, I become the advocate again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be an advocate for the other people in here who can't be an advocate for themselves. I'm going to stand up for them because they're getting nothing. They're getting nothing. The Nurse Ratchet has these group meetings that get nothing accomplished. I call her out on it all the time. Now I'm becoming troublesome.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to get rid of me. And I go, you can't get rid of me because I'm paying my own way. I'm not going through insurance, but you can't get rid of me. And so I'm raising a stink because it's very disturbing to me. Again, not getting help for myself at all.
Yeah.
The one thing that sent me over the top was there was a girl in there in her early 20s, and you had wristbands that were different colors that basically were indicators of how severe
you are at that moment. Yeah.
Right. So she had a red one, which was she's severe. She gets notice. I noticed her parents came, and that was kind of odd. And she gets notified, the parents do, that they need to remove her from the facility because the insurance company said,
they're gone.
We're done. She's had enough time. She should be fine. I'm going,
Oh,
This girl is so then I watch her. When she finds this out, she's crying. I watch her go over to the nurse's desk, and there's a paper clip that's about this big, thick one. She opens it up, and she goes right into her arm and pulls it all the way up to her elbow spot on the inside of her arm. And I was like, "Oh my God." And of course, medics and everything come there. They still made her go home.
I wonder where she's at today. I mean, I know when I think I mentioned this to you before, but when my mom had a stroke and she was in Washington, and I, became her caretaker to move her to California, and I tried to talk to the doctors. I mean, she was there for 3 months and was talking about her mental health, and they're like, "Oh, we don't deal with mental health."
Right,
Like,
right.
no, like you can't. And they were like, "Insurance is done. We can't send her home." I'm like, my mom has a physical condition where she needs 4 blood transfusions a week. She lives an hour from any hospital. She can't
Right.
drive. Like, you are sending someone home to die. And so you have to really learn to be an advocate for yourself. And then the fact that they don't connect mental health with physical health, because it's aligned. What goes on in your brain affects your body.
Yeah.
And and then it's like, and then a lot of health insurance companies don't cover therapy. And that's why with Big Silence Foundation, that's one of our largest programs, is Therapy for All, where we are trying, we have 50 therapists that we can connect you with. It's unheard of how still our uh, they haven't connected the dots. Like, why do you think,
No,
sorry, I'm
'cause
going
the
to go on a
stigma
tangent,
still
but like,
exists.
why do you
No,
think
the
cancer
stigma
happens?
still exists. Exactly, exactly. Not to interrupt you. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right, though.
Yeah.
The stigma still exists, and that's the whole idea. Like, I love what you're doing, and the idea of what your show is, what your podcast is so true because the big silence is what makes this thing become perpetual
Yeah.
by not having conversations, by not disclosing and information and for educational purposes and for treatment. And it's so sad because so many people suffer in silence. And
Mhm.
it's tragic. I did it. I get
Well,
it.
I'm proud of you for talking about it, 'cause, till my mom's last day, she was afraid of the stigma. My mom was
Yeah.
not a physically dangerous person. She knew her illness, but she was afraid to get on prescriptions because of the stigma. She, and then also figuring out, like we talked earlier, like that cocktail of what works for you, what doesn't. And it's a lot of work, but then also having a support system, and it's tough, but that's, having community around you, and even like Big Silence, and talking to women and men and talking about it and building that community where it's okay to not be okay. That's fine.
Right.
And I mean, look, for you, I want to talk a little bit more about Skid Row too, because you've been able to turn, your superpower into poetry that becomes music. And you heal so
Thank
many
you. That's
people.
very sweet.
You heal so many people through just performing and music. Not only heals you, but your audience as well. So that's amazing.
Wow.
And I know you're going
Thank you.
on tour. Yeah, of course. I'm serious.
I appreciate that.
And uh there's probably so many people in your audience that are like, I need to hear these lyrics. I need to just have fun. I need to dance. I need to whatever. And you're going on tour.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love like the joy that I get out of playing in front of people and making that connection with the audience is so profound and it's very difficult. It's different for everybody um, because it's an interpersonal interaction and so it has a different effect on everybody. For me, and I think I can speak for my band members too. It's like when you see the joy that you're participating in with a group of people who you don't know,
Mhm.
and you only know each other through the music that you've created and whatever's been written about you and things like that, but
Mhm.
mainly through the music that you've created. And to be able to sit there and have some sort of uh, connection with them is, I never realized how important that was
Mhm.
um, to people until it happened to me when I was an audience member.
Mhm.
That's when that's what made me become a musician,
Mhm.
because I went to see Kiss in Madison Square Garden. I was 13 years old, and I walked out of there going, "Man, I wanna do that for a living." What that was, I
Mhm.
didn't know. I just wanted that. I saw that spectacle, that was just larger than life, and then the way the audience was going berserk for what they were doing, and I'm like, that's magical. Like,
Mhm.
it's magical. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. Like, you go to a baseball game or something like that, and yeah, the fans are into it and stuff like that, but it's not sustained over the course of 2 hours, continuously, and those people still wanting more. You know, you go to a baseball
Mhm.
game, the game's over, you go home, and but you leave a concert, you're like, "Man, I don't wanna leave," or
Baseball games are way too long in my opinion, but I'm like, "When's it over?" But
Right, right, right.
I'm not a big baseball fan. But
So,
yeah, concerts are like, "No, no, no, more." I mean, imagine like, think about for you, and I know for myself, how music has gotten me through some really heavy times, through I mean, I there's an artist, Dermot Kennedy, I don't know if you know who that is, Irish artist and singer-songwriter,
not
and
familiar.
he was my healing through my mom's passing, and my
Wow,
husband knows that. I just played Dermot, like, it's so deep, it's so connecting,
that's
like,
heavy.
it's like someone feels what you're feeling, um, yeah, music is therapy, music is healing.
Without a doubt. I find that for me, it changes all the time.
Mhm,
Um, I'll come across stuff that I used to listen to as a kid that all of a sudden will have new meaning.
mhm,
Happens a lot with Motown, happens a lot with the Jackson 5, believe it or not.
mhm,
It happens with rediscovering even old metal albums, like the first or second Iron Maiden album, where I'll
yeah,
be like, "Oh my god, that's right," and I'll remember all the good that is associated with the memory of that record from when I was 16 or whatever, and it
yeah.
it's funny how the music that we gravitate to just brings us to a better place, and that's what it should do.
Yeah, I
I
would feel like
we
for
don't
me, it's like if I hear Nirvana or Pearl Jam now, I'm like, it takes me back to when I was a teenager and in such a dark place. And then it actually now makes me proud of myself. I'm like, I
Yeah.
remember, and I'm like, look how far you've come, girl.
Well, it's
Get
funny how
it.
music can help you find the good in yourself, you know?
Mhm.
Um, it's very rare that you listen to a piece of music and you go, "Wow, I feel like a bigger piece of shit than I did before I listened to that." You know, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that.
No, I might shed a tear, but it's because it makes you feel. It brings you back or it brings you present or it just makes you or it can be a good vibe or, like, makes you smile. I love music.
Yeah,
So
what's interesting, and this is kind of on topic, I guess. When we were in 1989, August of '89, we were doing this big show called the Moscow Music Peace Festival in Russia, and it was Motley Crue and Bon Jovi and Ozzy and Skid Row and Cinderella, Scorpions, and so we all were flying on this giant plane, starting in California to New Jersey to London, I believe to Germany, and then to Moscow, and we happened to be going. We were again. This is '89, this is the end of the Cold War, or
mhm.
the beginning of the end, if you will, and so things were changing, we're 25-year-old kids, we're like we were taught these are the bad guys. They're the
Mhm.
devil. You know, we're the good guys. They're the bad guys. And get there, and the people are amazing.
Yeah.
The people are great. It's like, okay, the people are great. So where's all the bad guys at, right? So, okay, we come to find out later that the bad guys aren't the people. The bad guys are the politicians, right? So, by and large. So we a group of people were walking through Red Square. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and there happens to be a young Russian guy with an acoustic guitar, kind of like you'd see on the streets of Los Angeles or New York City,
Mhm.
playing for change and monetary change, like nickels and dimes. And he's sitting there playing Yesterday by the Beatles.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we make brief eye contact. And all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, this guy doesn't speak a word of English, but he's singing a Beatles song in English to a group of people like from the United States or the UK that have never been there before. And he's profoundly touching each and every one of us through this 3-minute song.
Mhm.
And that's why I went, man, I'm doing the right thing. Like
Mhm.
I'm involved in music, and music is like the ultimate communicator, and it supersedes all these barriers that we have in our lives, in our world, whether it's religious or philosophical or political or geographical. Um, it supersedes all of that. I'll never forget. I picture it perfectly. That moment, I'm like, wow, what an amazing thing, And then it's no wonder why music is used as uh, treatment to help, autistic children and whatnot, and the healing effects that it has, because it really does um, touch upon something physiological within us that we haven't been able to pinpoint yet. I mean, I guess we can have it, how it affects your serotonin and your dopamine and things like that, and how it helps with the production of that in a good way. And but it's just incredible that on a very simple level, that someone's singing a beautiful melody with beautiful lyrics can have such a profound effect on a kid from New Jersey, and
Yeah.
probably a bazillion others.
Yeah. That's true. So you're headed out on tour, and I'm gonna put in the show notes where you can all your tour stops. But I know that tour can also cause a bit of anxiety, and it's a big thing. So what are you planning? And maybe you haven't thought of this. What are you gonna do for you to make sure that you feel good on tour and have boundaries or take care of yourself?
Well, for me, I do a lot of reading on tour.
Mhm.
That helps out a lot. Keeps me engaged in something other than the immediate moment at hand, if you will. There's always, I mean, touring with your friends is amazing, but there's always moments where there's going to be some sort of turmoil, if you will,
Mhm.
some sort of fires that need to be put out. That's the nature of a business. Um, but my main thing for me is to always be aware if I feel it coming, like that black wave, which has
Mhm.
subsided quite a bit since I've been back on meds and things like that. But if I do feel it coming, I know a couple of things. I know that it's not going to kill me. That's number
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
Number two is it's only going to last about 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
It's not going to last the whole day. It's not going to last a week. It's not going to last a lifetime. It's going to come, it's going to have its moment, and it's going to go.
Right.
And
So
so if
you're
I'm confident in that, which I am, I'm able to sit there and prepare myself for this little or big bump in the road. And there's no more for me, and the meds have a lot to do with this. There's no more like howling and feeling like the soul is being ripped out of me. it's an anxiety that is definitely manageable, and a panic that is definitely manageable now, where it once wasn't. Um, and so that in and of itself gives me the confidence to know I can withstand it.
Mhm.
Having that confidence helps you to get through it quicker and to have
Mhm.
it be less frequent.
Yeah. Just knowing, like, even I don't know if you have a meditation practice or not, but even just learning breath work or learning to breathe or getting in touch with your body or grounding or in your mind saying, I am safe. I am
Yeah.
safe.
I have things that make me feel safe, things that, the certain things like, always being able to be in contact with my family, which wasn't always the case back in the day.
Yeah.
Thankfully for, FaceTime and cell phones and whatnot, your family is
Yeah.
is right there for you at a, moment's notice. That's huge
Yeah.
for me. That is absolutely huge. Because I could get on a phone with my wife and she'll immediately know if something's going on.
Yeah.
I'll like old habits die hard, so I'll sit there and try to hide it, and she'll go, "Now, what's going on? Let's talk about it." We talk about it,
Yeah.
and it helps amazingly because it's like, okay, you're getting rid of that negative energy into the universe. You're allowing space to for positivity to inhabit.
Yeah. No, it's good to have your people that know you so well. And my husband is so amazing. And then I have two friends, brothers. Shout out to Jeremy and Shane. They're like my best friends, and they were always there for each other no matter what. So,
That's like the guys in my band, like
yeah.
Rachel, who I started the band with, is gosh, our friendship and our brotherhood is 36 years old.
Yeah.
And so, and again, ironically, he's the one who found me on my second suicide attempt, and he's the
Mhm.
one that called 911 and got me on the gurney and got me in, into to the hospital, into the emergency room. Because
Yeah.
the second time I did it was that was the real one. I was done.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, he was living on the other side of my house, and he had a separate, staircase that he would come down to go to the main floor and go in the kitchen, and then there was a walkway upstairs that was like, I don't know, 40 yards long or whatever, and you that would be my side of the house that you walk over, and every night he'd walk or every morning he'd walk down that specific staircase, and that one morning he decided to walk across the top. And he
Mhm.
saw my door open a little, so he opened up a little bit more, saw the empty pill bottles on the floor, saw my eyes roll back in my
Mm.
head, and he went to work, and I'm forever indebted to him.
That's yeah. I mean, that was what was meant to be, you know?
And then,
Um,
yeah, and then, like, with the when I had the breakdown on the road, you know, my wife, and my kids, my wife was like, "Alright, this is what we have to do." She didn't panic. She just said she laid it out, "Let's get you home. And from home, we're gonna go here, and we're gonna meet with this." She had it all set up, and then we're gonna go to your general practitioner and let them know what's going on, and everybody was well informed, before I got there, and I was embarrassed, I gotta be honest, I was embarrassed because it came out of nowhere, and I had that feeling that I had beaten this thing, and I realized that you don't beat it,
yeah.
you manage it, and
Yeah,
it's just the way
exactly.
that it is, and, which is fine. I've come to accept that and understand that as that I've accepted it, now it gives me even stronger tools to manage it.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great in my opinion, my
Thank you.
non-professional opinion,
I
and
appreciate it.
perhaps I'll see you in Dallas and talk to my husband a couple times about that.
Yeah, you guys are more than welcome. It would be great for you guys to be there.
Yeah, I'm gonna check out the rest of your tour schedule as well and see where else you are. We'll put all of that schedule in the show notes,
Thank you.
and, it's been so nice getting to know you.
Well, the
Yeah.
pleasure's all mine, and I appreciate you sharing your story with me too, um, yesterday, and the fact that, you've decided to take something tragic and turn it into something extremely positive, and hopefully that all the positive work you're doing is infectious to other people.
The big silence. The big silence.